Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Twin, as read by Lord Naren White. He flung a bag of something into the boat and then got in himself and sat down. It was Packard. Then Bill, he come out and got in. Packard says in a low voice, "All ready? Shove off." I couldn't hardly hang on to the shutters. I was so weak, but Bill says, "Hold on. Did you go through 'em?" "No, didn't you?" "No. So he's got his share of the cash yet?" "Well, then, come along. No use to take truck and leave money." "Say, won't he suspicion what we're up to?" "Maybe he won't, but we got to have it anyway. Come along." So they got out and went in. The door slammed too because it was on the careened side, and in a half second I was in the boat, and Jim come tumbling after me. I was out with my knife and cut the rope, and away we went. We didn't touch an oar. We didn't speak, nor whisper, nor hardly even breathe. We went gliding swift along, dead silent past the tip of the paddle box and past the stern in a second or two more. He was 100 yards below the wreck, and the darkness soaked her up, every last sign of her, and we was safe and knowed it. When we was 300 or 400 yards downstream, we see the lantern show like a little spark at the Texas door for a second, and we knowed by that the rascals had missed their boat, and was beginning to understand that they was in just as much trouble now as Jim Turner was. Then Jim manned the oars, and we took out after our raft. Now was the first time that I begun to worry about men. I reckon I hadn't had time to before. I begun to think how dreadful it was, even for murderers, to be in such a fix. I says to myself, there ain't no telling, but I might come to be a murderer myself yet, and then how would I like it? So I says to Jim, "The first light we see, we'll land 100 yards below it or above it, in a place where it's a good hiding place for you and the skiff, and then I'll go and fix up some kind of a yarn, and get somebody to go for that gang, and get them out of their scrape, so they can be hung when their time comes." But that idea was a failure, and for pretty soon it begun to storm again, and this time worse than ever. The rain poured down, and we never a light showed. Everybody in bed, I reckon. We boomed along down the river, watching for lights and watching for our raft, and after a long time the rain let up, but the clouds stayed and the lightning kept whimpering, and by a flash showed us a black thing ahead, floating, and we made for it. It was the raft, and mighty glad was we to get aboard of it again. We seen a light now away down to the right on shore, so I said I would go for it. The skiff was half full of plunder with which that gang had stole there on the wreck. We hustled it onto the raft in a pile, and I told Jim to float along down and show a light when he judged. He had gone about 2 miles, and keep it burning till I come. Then I manned my oars and shoved for the light. As I got down towards it, 3 or 4 more showed up on a hillside. I was in a village. I closed in above the shorelight and laid on my oars and floated. And I went by, I see it, it was a lantern hanging on the jack staff of a double-hull ferryboat. I skimmed around for the watchman, a-wondering whereabouts he slept, and by I found him roosting on the bitts forward, with his head down between his knees. I gave his shoulder 2 or 3 little shoves and began to cry. He stirred up in a kind of startlish way, but when he see it was only me. He took a good gap and stretch, and then he says, "Hello, what's up? Don't cry, bub. What's the trouble?" I says, "Pap, and ma'am, and sis, and—" Then I broke down. He says, "Oh, dang it, now, don't take on so. We all was to have our troubles, and this'll come out all right. What's the matter with 'em?" There, are you the watchman of the boat?" "Yes," he says, kind of pretty well satisfied like. "I'm the captain and the owner, and the mate and the pilot and the watchman, and head deckhand. Sometimes I'm the freight and passengers. I ain't as rich as old Jim Hornback, but I can't so blame generous and good to Tom, Dick, and Harry is what he is, and slam around the money the way he does. But I've told him a many a time I wouldn't trade places with him, for I says, a sailor's life is the life for me, and I'm derned if I'd live 2 mile out of town, where there ain't nothing ever going on, not for all his spondulicks and as much more on top of it, says I. I broke in and says, they're in an awful peck of trouble, and who is? Why, Pap and Mam and Sis and Miss Hooker, if you'd take your ferry boat and go up there. Up where? Where are they? On the wreck. What wreck? Why, there ain't but one. What do you mean, the Walter Scott? Yes. Oh, excuse me. What, you don't mean the Walter Scott? Yes. Good land. What are they doing there, for gracious sakes? Well, they didn't go there a purpose. I bet they hadn't. Why, great goodness, there ain't no chance for 'em if they don't get off mighty quick. Why in the nation did they ever get into such a scrape? Easy enough. Miss Hooker was a visiting up there to the town. Yes, Booth's Landing. Go on. She was a visiting there at Booth's Landing, and just in the edge of the evening she started over with her black woman in the horse ferry to stay all night at her friend's house, Miss what you may call her. I disremember her name, and they lost their steering oar, and swung around and went a-floating down, stern first, about 2 mile, and saddle bags on the wreck, and the ferryman and the black woman, and the horses was all lost. But Miss Hooker, she made a grab and got aboard the wreck. Well, about an hour after dark, we come along down in our trading scow, and it was so dark we didn't notice the wreck till we was right on it, and so we saddlebagsed. But all of us was saved by Bill Whipple, and oh, he was the best creature. I most wish it had been me. I do. My George, it's the beatenest thing I ever struck. And then what did you all do? Well, we hollered and took on, but it's so wide that we couldn't make nobody hear. So Pap said somebody got to get ashore and get help somehow. I was the only one that could swim, so I made a dash for it, and Miss Hooker, she said if I didn't strike help sooner, come here and help her and hunt her up her uncle, and he'd fix the thing. I made the land about a mile below, and been fooling along ever since, trying to get people to do something, but they said, what, in such a night as such a current, there ain't no sense in it, and go for the steam ferry. Now if you're going, by Jackson I'd like to, and blame it. I don't know, but I will. But who in the dignation's gonna pay for it? Do you reckon your Pap? Why, that's all right. Miss Hooker, she told me, particular, that her uncle Hornback, great guns, is he her uncle? Looky here, you break for that light over yonder, and turn out west where you get there, and about 1/4 of a mile out you'll come to the tavern, and tell him to dart you out to Jim Hornback's, and he'll foot the bill. And don't you fool around any, because he'll want to know the news. Tell him I'll have his niece all safe before he can get to town. Hump yourself now. I'm a-going around the corner and here to roust out my engineer. I struck for the light, but as soon as he turned the corner, I went back and got into my skiff, and bailed her out, and then pulled up shore in the easy water about 600 yards, and tucked myself in among some woodboats, for I couldn't rest easy till I could see the ferry boat start. But take it all around, I was feeling rather comfortable on all accounts of taking all this trouble for that gang, for not many would have done it. I wish the widow knowed about it. I judged she would be proud of me for helping these rapscallions, because rapscallions and deadbeats is the kind the widow and good people takes the most interest in. Well, before long, here comes the wreck, dim and dusky, sliding along down. A kind of cold shiver went through me, and then I struck out for her. She was very deep, and I see in a minute there weren't much chance for anybody being alive in her. I pulled all around her and hollered a little, but there wasn't any answer. All dead still. I felt a little bit heavy-hearted about the gang, but not much, for I reckoned if they could stand it, I could. Then here comes the ferry boat. So I shoved for the middle of the river, and on a long stream down slant. And when I judged I was out of the eye reach, when I laid on my oars, and looked back and see her go, and smell around the wreck for Miss Hooker's remainders, because the captain would know Uncle Hornback would want them. And then, pretty soon, the ferry boat gave it up and went for the shore, and I laid into my work and went a booming down the river. It did seem a powerful long time before Jim's light showed up, and when it did show, it looked like it was 1,000 miles off. By the time I got there, the sky was beginning to get a little gray in the east, so we struck for an island and hid the raft, and sunk the skiff, and turned in and slept like dead people. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light to be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.